You look so little in the frame. Okay, rolling.
Rolling.
1, 2, 3. Welcome to Muay Thai Bones.
Something, something edition.
Is that what we do? It's been a while since we did a Bones.
I forget everything.
So welcome to Muay Thai Bones, the most in-depth Muay Thai podcast in the world.
In the universe.
In the universe. Wait, we have to now say multiverse because of this MCU stuff.
Across all timelines.
All timelines. We try to dive into the philosophies and traditions and bigger social
impacts, ramifications,
concepts behind Thailand's Muay Thai. We also try to dive into some of like the things you've explored as a fighter. If you don't know us, this is Sylvie von Duuglas-Ittu, the Western fighter with the most fights in Thailand, by far, more than double, working on triple, the second place holder, the most experienced Western fighter in Thailand ever. And I'm her husband, Kevin, who's kind of the sidekick and photographer. Yeah. And we've been hearing you guys asking, like almost really begging for another Muay Thai Bones episode. There's a guy that follows me on Instagram that messages me and says he listens to his son, I think,
with his
Alexandro, with his son, in the car or something. And he's like, this is my favorite thing you guys do. So we're trying to get these podcasts out. Life has been really arduous. One of the bigger tests of our time in Thailand this last year, people are going through very difficult things in COVID, so we don't have it harder than other people, but putting a Muay Thai Bones together, for some reason, takes great focus and energy, and we're trying to manage the other things, the Muay Thai Library, Sylvie's training, and everything else, right? So, well, you're very quiet on that.
Well, it's just, I guess the way to describe it is that everything is very disrupted. And a lot of what we talked about had to do with like being in the thick of fighting. I'm still training, but it's not the same training. I'm not fighting. There are no fights. Closed down. We're not traveling. Usually we're in the car doing these stuff like that. So it's just disruptive to us. Yeah, and
not only has Sylvie fought more than literally probably anyone on the planet over the last 5 years, and produced more documentary combat sport footage than maybe anyone on the planet. Both things were tremendous energy
at the same time.
At the same time. It'd be one thing if you had this historic fight career and then you retired and then you had this historic documentary career, but she actually has had them at the same time, both of them unparalleled. And that regimen of fights, train, shoot, content was locked in a stabilizing way. It was like a Jenga puzzle. And so when you start pulling things out, it's very hard to reassemble what you want to do with that intensity in new habits and patterns.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like that way that has been is going to be the case for at least a year or more. Yeah. So it's been difficult, but we wanted to get an episode out. There's great things to talk about. And if you're new to the Muay Thai Bones, we go take a deep dive on a topic and then 30 minutes later change up usually on a totally different topic. So if you're not into what we're talking about now, we might talk about something completely different in 30 minutes. Sound good? We didn't actually talk about what we're going to do first.
We didn't plan. We've forgotten how to do this. We didn't plan what we're talking about first.
I have them a little bit in my mind. We looked at them yesterday. Some of the ideas for a podcast subject, and if you want, shoot us a message on social media if you have a topic that you'd like to have us covered. And I had this impulse when we were starting shooting this. I'm like, you watch other podcasts or whatnot, and they're like, be sure to follow us and write a review and give 5 stars on whatever. Don't do any of that. Don't do any of that. We want the Muay Thai Bones to remain small and personal. Like in the beginning, we did 3-hour podcasts on purpose, didn't timestamp them, just so only the people who travel with us can take a deep dive with us into the thing we care about. And I feel like that's what I want, like having not shot a Muay Thai Bones. Oh, and if you're a patron, you can get the audio version. If you're watching us on YouTube, that's free for everybody. All our Muay Thai Bones are like that. You can get the audio version for $1, being a $1 patron, and get also some of the great Muay Thai Library. But I want this podcast to be just us together. It's like a talking journey or something. For at least that is for me.
He wants you to work for it.
No, I want you to. I don't want people diving in for 5 minutes and get a cool thought or something.
It's not for everyone. Like this is not a kind of like topical. What's some Muay Thai stuff going on? Like the latest on. It's actually not the latest on. It's actually like super historical. And how does this come to be? And why is it like that? And how is it changing? And what does that mean?
And so this goes to what I think would be a great first topic, which is Celeste. What's her last name?
Hansen.
Hansen, female fighter in Phuket.
Yeah, from Australia.
Yeah, who's fought some very big, tough fighters. Man, she took on Petchy Jaw.
Yes, on Thai Fight.
On Thai Fight. Yeah. And Petchy Jaw is the best female Muay Thai fighter in the world, I would say. Yeah. She's taken on other good fighters. She had a comment about, I think it was about 6 months ago or so, where she was like, we are in the golden age of female fighting. Mm. And it was a very interesting concept, a very interesting idea, where the golden age, if you don't know, is considered like late 1980s, of Muay Thai, male Muay Thai, but Muay Thai, is late 80s, when Diesel Noy and Samart made Lumpini their stomping grounds.
That would be early 80s.
Oh, early 80s. What was that? 1982.
82 was when Diesel Noy's Fighter of the Year, when they fought.
So 1982, early 80s, all the way through to early 90s.
I would say mid-90s, but yeah.
Well, like 95 would be the latest. Yeah, so about 12 years. Yeah. And it was this perfect storm of talent, promotional creativeness, huge money being invested in the sport. And
styles and individual personality and like superstars, like they just don't exist anymore.
Yeah, and not only that, the superstars, the guys who were C-class fighters in the stadiums there would be superstars now.
So good.
Like the worst fighters on the circuit would clean up the circuit today. It just, the level of Muay Thai was just really incredible and beautiful, and it's not replicable. Really, the sport has, money's fallen out of the sport. There's far fewer people in the sport. There's good fighters. There's good fights, but we're far from the golden age of Muay Thai. But her idea was we're in the golden age of female fighting. Mm-hmm. And it's a very interesting idea as a fighter. First of all, for female fighters to think of themselves in a historical context, to think in terms of the female fighters who fought before you. Mm-hmm. And also, if you're in the golden age, that means the female fighters that will fight after you.
Yeah.
And I thought this was just a very, it's not a thought that would have, something that would have been said 10 years ago, when there were very tough Western fighters fighting in Thailand. But I think female fighters at the time felt like they were kind of breaking ground.
Well, we have been in Thailand for 9 years, so for you to say 10 years ago is right about when we came.
Totally.
And the way that female Thai fighters were talked about at the time was very dismissive and disrespectful.
By the West.
Yes.
By the West.
Yes, but it was not seen as that they are strong or even competitive. Those comments were coming from people who had been here years before, so it wasn't actually contemporary with when we actually got here. It was people talking about even 5 years.
Yeah, but we have to be very careful when we say, people talk about. Sometimes it's just trollish people that open their mouths.
It was actually Western female fighters who had fought here were saying that.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's not you. Yes, there was a thread of people talking about Thai female fighters as if they're just like rice girls or
bar girls
or whatever. And even still, out of we get European comments who still have this prejudiced idea about the Thai female fighter. But also, that being said, there were female fighters fighting in IFMA who were very, very strong and respected.
And just
like 10 years ago.
Killing people, yeah.
Yeah. So
talking about the golden age of female Muay Thai.
Yeah. But you were going back in time.
Well, you had said that 10 years ago,
I'm saying
female Muay Thai is not the way it is now.
No, I'm saying 10 years ago, somebody would not have made such a statement because they didn't think of female Muay Thai in a historic context of what had come before them and what will come after them. That was really interesting. We spent a lot of time talking about the history of male Muay Thai, and we talk about the golden age, the silver age that came before it, and then the kind of decline. Like we've spent a lot of time sharing the idea that male Muay Thai needs to be seen on a historical spectrum, right? And it was very cool for Celeste to take that idea and apply it to female Muay Thai. And I'm just saying the conversation about Muay Thai at the time, female Muay Thai, people wouldn't even have thought of this idea, that there could be a golden age of female Muay Thai. And so what's kind of cool about this is, one, the questions even being asked shows that there's great progress. Like already, like when you first started coming to Thailand, we made a tremendous effort to try to document the female fighters who came before you. Anne Quinlan, we celebrated Kaylee Reese, who had a great achievement right before you. We, especially Liam Griffin, like pioneers of the sport who like came to, some of them, Imam Barlow did a little bit here early, that kind of like were pioneers of the sport. And also Sylvie Charbonneau, who made what you're doing even imaginable. We wanted to document the history before. And this is not how female fighters, Western female fighters talked at all at the time when we came.
Yeah.
There was no sense of giving credit to people who were before you.
Yeah.
What did that mean to you? What did that change? Like, we made a very big commitment to that, to telling these other stories. The Rongsit story of the female fighters at Rongsit Stadium.
There's a couple of layers to that. One of them is that if you don't know where you came from, you have no idea where you're going, and you just get kind of in this like loop. And part of it feels like nobody's ever done this before, and I have no idea how to navigate this. Like being a woman in Thailand, you're usually the only woman at your gym. You don't know other Western women who are fighting, and if you do, maybe it's like
that was back then.
Weird.
That was back then.
When I first came here, so it was like.
And social media was not really a thing.
But that's the two parts of it, is that it's like you feel like you're the first one ever doing this. Like, I don't know how to navigate this. There's no blueprint. And part of that was true even though women had done it before, because nobody documented it. Nobody talked about it. Teresa Wintermere had been here for years before I got here. And she was written about in Muay Siam. So when I was learning Thai, I was like reading Teresa Wintermere all the time. But like, I didn't know anything about her. When I went and talked to her, when we interviewed her, it was like same experiences, and it would have meant something for women 10, 15 years ago to have other women's experiences, but the internet wasn't the way that it is now. People were not sharing the way that they do now. First time we came to Thailand, uploading a 2-minute video took like 5 hours. Like people were not sharing online.
Yeah, totally. There were no fights from then. Almost none of them documented. Sylvie, also many times the women that came to Thailand were like, kind of, I'm going on a personal journey. Found myself in a gym training against Thai boys, and this is just like going to the moon. And there was no sense of like Sylvie Charbonneau, who fought 50 career fights at the time, and just for us it was a surreal number. Up in Lana, she would check her email like once a week or twice a month, and Sylvie would email. We found her email and asked her questions.
She was very nice.
But at no time was she like her story was not known.
No, and she fought 50 times. She was one of the reasons that first goal even just seemed, we would never have come up with that number without her.
What number was it, 50?
50.
I have even forgotten. There's so many numbers that have been coming.
But with 50 fights over the 10 years that she was here, I think there's like one on YouTube. Like
Is
one.
there even?
Yeah,
I thought
and it's
it was
not
a
even a
partial
full fight.
fight.
It's
it was
partial.
a partial fight, yeah.
But this is, I think that partially the world was such at that time that you wouldn't want all your fights up. People are nasty, you get your ass kicked sometimes, things like that. With an influx of more women sharing now, more women having online presence, it's the we of me of sharing these experiences that having your fights up
women
is better.
still don't put their fights up.
No, but you see them now on like Super Champ or Hardcore. Like they're on channels that are not yours. Like people are not personally putting up their own fights, but their fights are available now.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that female fighters still are not telling their own personal story. It's just that the media connectivity is sharing the story now. I find. Do you disagree with that?
I think yes and no. I don't feel like a lot of the women who have social media presence are really sharing their stories. They're sharing themselves. They don't share a lot of their stories. Okay. But
I feel like there's people are told, or it is imitatively implied that you should put up pad work and whatnot.
Yeah, to me that's not telling a story.
Yeah, that's what I'm not debating with you. Yeah. I'm saying the opposite. So in a certain regard, the whole like rising tide of social media has like exposed more stories, shown more fights, but there's still a kind of like seclusive reality of being a female fighter in Thailand that does not bode well for history in a weird way. So this is just us talking about the idea that even telling a history of female fighters, even the idea of starting a female history of female fighters is a new thing. And changes have occurred in the sport and the way we talk about Muay Thai, where we can start thinking about female fighting on a timeline. Yeah. And right there, that's a huge thing, because even if there was a great, unbeatable Western fighter in 1987 in Thailand, it's erased. Yeah. It doesn't exist. Yeah. Like, there's a Thai female fighter who supposedly was kind of unbeatable, the best female fighter in Thailand, Dao Persuk. Oh, she's from awesome. That time. You can see almost nothing of her, and that's a Thai fighter. Yeah. Is everything okay?
Yeah, I'm just checking the time.
Good. Okay. So that's us sinking into the idea is that even telling a timeline story of female fighters is new. And I think a lot of that credit actually goes to you. You've been a historic female fighter, and you've put yourself and your story and the story of others out there like no one else, like a fucking supernova. And I think it has budged the needle on what can be shared, what should be shared about oneself and also about the sport. And introducing the idea of celebrating Thai female fighters and appreciating their incredible skill. Fighting that prejudice that was pretty rampant around the world and still is in some areas. Like some Western coaches had said some pretty awful things about Thai female fighters, like painfully, honestly racist.
Yeah, and you're like, who is not fucking calling you out on this? Like, it's horrible, and people are just like, oh, that's a perfectly fine thing to say.
Yeah, and so part of what I want to say about this golden age idea is the Thai female fighters are born and raised in the mother's milk of Muay Thai culture. They are the best fighters in the world. They do not always have career arcs that bring the most out of their potential. Matter of fact, never. They just don't have the arc to maximize their potential like male Thai fighters. But they're the fluent speakers of Muay Thai. And yes, Westerners can train up and get your combos down and beat Thais and do those things. But if we are going to talk about the historical arc of Muay Thai, we have got to bring the Thai female fighter with us and raise them up above us. Otherwise, what we're doing makes no historical sense. It just becomes, I came to Thailand and I beat a Thai.
A Thai.
Which a very well-known Western male fighter made his dream to beat a Thai in a spectacular fashion.
Yeah.
Boy.
Bucket list.
All right. So.
But even there's like a pathway. It's like a train of it's like pulling the carts behind it kind of thing, which is that Chiang Mai becoming like the place for female fighters, and it was Thai female fighters, and so Western women could go there and get fights.
Yeah.
Size made a difference there in terms of how many fights you could get, variety of fights, that kind of thing. But Chiang Mai was like the fight mecca for female Muay Thai, but it's not super visible. Like there's no like on TV tape kind of thing.
Totally.
And then out of that, out of people already coming to Thailand, already going to places where they knew they could get fights, women were coming, they were fighting good, like the most competent, fighting all the time female fighters in Chiang Mai. And then out of that, started getting these little like, I don't know, sparks of fighting on TV, making it visible. Now people in the West are seeing these very accomplished.
I kind of don't follow what you're talking about.
So the first part of the train.
Well, first part of the train was Phuket. But when we arrived, Phuket was the center of female Muay Thai, and most of it around Sylvie.
Yes.
Sylvie basically was the female, like, Westerners would go there and get belts, basically. And still to this day, everything has shifted. Sylvie no longer at all, but there are gyms where if you're a Western female, you go there and you fight and get a world championship belt. So it started with Sylvie and Phuket. And Phuket was a good location because larger bodied female fighters could fight each other even, because a large tourist thing. And then the center moved to Chiang Mai. Honestly, 100% due to you and your
the Westerners,
documentation.
but the Thai women were already there fighting a lot.
But the scene.
This is the difference between Phuket, as we understand it, and Chiang Mai, is that Phuket did not have a Thai women fighting each other scene. It was the Western women versus Thai women, sometimes Western versus Western. That was like the Western woman go to Phuket, get fights. Chiang Mai, there was the Thai female scene was happening all the time. They have sports schools, they have tons of fights.
And we don't want to say that there was no Thai on Thai stuff in Phuket, but Chiang Mai, the dominant.
It's happening whether you're there.
The dominant
or not.
scene was female. Every night there was female fights.
Yeah.
Like, so what was cool about Chiang Mai is that there was this living pulse of female Muay Thai that had nothing to do with Westerners other than it was for tourists to watch.
Which drew
right?
Western women to get plugged into that.
Totally.
And so I'm saying that that's the first cart on the train. And then starting to have like internationally televised, like Channel 8, you know, you have Muay Hardcore, you have Super Champ, you have the all-female fight cards that I was on that were not televised, but like those were in Bangkok, so maybe they'd be on Thai TV. Queen's birthday. It used to be you could only see women fighting on the Queen's birthday, like once a year.
Yeah, but you seem to
Now
be
you
mixing
see
eras.
I am mixing eras. I'm saying Phuket pulled Chiang Mai, now women are on TV, and these women have been fighting for years, and so they're good when they get on TV.
What
rather
women?
Than like just
I'm not following. I'm sorry.
Thai women and Western women fighting on TV.
Okay, let's hold off on Super Champ and Max because it's its own story.
Well, that's why Celeste is saying this is the golden age of female Muay Thai.
Yeah,
So we can't hold off on it. That is why it's the female.
Okay, we're about to run out.
Age.
We're about to run out. We'll go on this topic.
We'll fight on the next one.
Okay, sounds good. All right. So, I'm I'm a compartmental thinker, so I wanted to chunk this into two pieces so we don't run over important information. The first part of the question I was trying to get to is just the idea of historical female Muay Thai, thinking about fighters in the context of those that came before them and after them. Now let's answer the question, is today the golden age of female Muay Thai? And also, why does Celeste think it is, probably? Mm-hmm. Because serious changes have been occurring in the last 6 months or so. I would say a year? A year. The last year or so that are radical to the opportunity of Western women and also Thai women. And these, as you were saying before, the only time you would see Thai female fighters, or female Muay Thai fighters fight would be on a Queen's Birthday card, which would be televised, mm-hmm. or a WPMF world title fight that would be put on a televised show. Mm-hmm. And then there was POM, who had female-only promotions.
Right.
And those were televised.
Yeah, so you have like Naikanam Tom Day, Queen's Birthday, and then maybe like Songkran or something that POM is putting together.
Yes. And everything changed with the rise of entertainment Muay Thai. And if you're a listener of the Muay Thai Bones, we have railed against entertainment Muay Thai. Sylvie kind of has, unless she can't find any other fights, she will not fight on entertainment Muay Thai shows. We do not think they're good for the long run health of Muay Thai. But one of the most interesting things is this change in female fighting opportunity would in no way happen without entertainment Muay Thai.
100%. Yeah.
Not even close. And not only that, it wasn't anticipatable. We talked about like when we were like, oh my God, our knee's going to be taken away from Thailand's Muay Thai.
Yeah, the death of Muay Khao.
Yeah, the death of Muay Khao. Because there were suddenly moves being made in Thailand that were out.
Antithetical.
No, they were banning knees because of COVID. This is no longer happening. It happened for 2 weeks and disappeared. But this is the point we made when we talked about that. In Thailand, nothing changes, nothing changes, nothing changes. It looks like it will never, ever change. And then it changes incredibly fast. Yep. And you don't know what that change is going to be. Before, we were afraid because of entertainment Muay Thai that knees were going to be taken out of stadium Muay Thai. And that would just, it would ruin the history, the art of Muay Thai in Thailand. That didn't happen. It threatened to happen, and it could still happen. But now opportunity for females have come out of the entertainment Muay Thai. And what's ironic about it is the dominant entertainment Muay Thai success show that everyone imitated was Max Muay Thai. Mm-hmm. And Max Muay Thai made it an absolute principle to ban women from fighting on the show.
Right. No women, no kids.
Yeah, they started with no women, no kids, and then they didn't have enough fights, so they let kids in. Right. And it was just no women. Sylvie is one of the very few fighters that actually fought at Max Stadium. So a historic thing.
4 women ever fought at the stadium.
And you were the first with Mung Sing Ju. Yeah. With Mung Sing Ju. But it's really interesting. Max Muay Thai started this whole 3-round windmilling, aggressive style, entertainment style, and banned women. And then what happened was Super Champ and Hardcore. They got into, I think Channel 8 got in a dispute with Max, and they're like, we can just do what you're doing, but better. We'll make women not only allowed to fight, but the highlight of the fight.
Yeah, this was interesting. So the promoter for Super Champ and Hardcore, which are 2 shows, but they have a single promoter. They're basically the same thing, but like one is with MMA gloves and one is with regular gloves.
Okay.
But Deer Gyat Pet, he is the son of Gyat Pet, who's like one of the most famous golden era promoters. His son started kind of just experimentally with women. The first was actually Hong Kao with Callista many years ago.
Years ago?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Years ago. So the first female fight on Super Champ was...
Super Champ is years old?
Yes.
Oh.
It was...
We don't have to go into the fine details.
Muay Thai was on Channel 8. They lost their contract with Channel 8, and Channel 8 was like, now we're going to do this in Bangkok. And it was Super Champ. There was no hardcore. It was Super Champ. And I think it was like MX was the hardcore version at the time, but like...
That was a different promotion.
Hong Kao and Callista Parts were the first female fighters, and then they didn't have another female fight for a very long time after that. And then they came back with Sao Sing, and they were like, push it, like plug it. And they started promoting female fighters, like, these are our stars, and it went live. And
the reason why they did that was not because they love women, but another promotion that we're not fans of, won championship. A lot of problems with the promotion. We do understand there's a lot of good with the promotion, but the way that one championship grew and promoted female fighters, starting with Stamp, right, at Fairtex, they basically... hyped the living daylights out of Stamp and her opponents and made female fighters the stars of cards. So,
which is the same thing the UFC did with Ronda Rousey.
Exactly. Right? And one championship, obviously, is trying to steal the fire of the UFC. So all of this goes back to Ronda Rousey and the other queens that followed Ronda Rousey, although Ronda Rousey just fucking blew the lid off the whole thing. But... so you get this lineage of kind of like entertainment, hyped, female-oriented cards that ended up producing Super Champ and Max, like Thai female celebrated stars. Yes. Sao Sing first, and then Dong Khom Tha kind of has become like the second tier of that. And what it showed was that female fights... well, there are a couple of things. One is female fights can be the most exciting fight on the card, just like at times in the UFC they are.
On that show, they almost always are.
On which show?
On Super Champ and Hardcore.
Yeah, but we're also biased too. Yeah. But yeah, to the average viewer, the female fight might be the best fight on the card. But not only that, building the brand of a promotion around a Thai female fighter can be really lucrative.
But this, okay.
This is a huge thing.
I don't want to cut you off because you had a compartmentalized like progression of things. But this is what I was talking about before of pulling the train, is that look at who are the superstars who are being promoted at these entertainment. You have Sao Sing, who was a superstar when she was like 13 to 17. Yeah. Had a baby, came back, was able to become a star here. Dong Khom Tha has been wrecking it in Asan for years. Yeah. She came to Fairtex, same time as Stamp, didn't get on the one train, and instead got on this other train. She was the ugly stepsister and kind of got pushed out of or left Fairtex because they didn't take her seriously. But then you look at, because it's partially because Sao Sing helps with the matchmaking, so she's pulling her friends. But the people that she's pulling in, when she's pulling in like Fa Si Tong, she's pulling in Kwan Chai, she's pulling in Chomani. These are older Thai female fighters. These are fighters who established themselves at a time that's like, oh, there's no female Muay Thai, because it was happening not on TV, and now you see them on TV, and they're like retired superstars, basically. They are kind of like retired superstars. So that's what I mean by this, like, this whole scene got pulled, and then the train is here on TV, and you're like, oh my God, where'd she come from? And you're like, she's been a fighter for 15 years, like 10 years. Totally, and have 100, 200 fights. So this is my beginning of my answer to Celeste, but this is the golden age. This is not the golden age of female Muay Thai. This is the silver age of female Muay Thai. The media context of female opportunity and the imitative promotional model of UFC, one championship, then imitating the UFC, and then Super Champ imitating Max, but ditching Max's banning of women, which was so ridiculous. I still roll my eyes on that. And grafting onto one, all these kinds of like non-traditional Muay Thai entertainment structures
have created a context for great female fighting. But we do not have great female fighting yet. Like, at least in my opinion, the golden age is the great female fighting. And a lot of what the current context is about is the Thai female fighters are actually, like you're saying, they're older, experienced fighters from a different age, a different time. A lot of these fighters don't even really train hard full time. They're semi-retired in a lot of ways.
Well, that's also what you see with male fighters on like Thai fight.
Yeah, but Thai fight is not the heartbeat of Muay Thai. This is the heartbeat. This is like the heartbeat of female opportunity right now. And so the Thai female fighters are kind of like being harvested from the past, in which they didn't have a lot of shine. And you can't have a golden age until you have just the best of talent and skill against the best of talent and skill. And then the other dimension of this, and I'll see if you agree with me, the other dimension of this, which is a little bit deceptive, is all these entertainment shows aren't even traditional Muay Thai. They were designed on the Max model to give Westerners the advantage in scoring. In the scoring, they took out all the things that the Thais are the best at. They leveled the playing field, and so now you get good matchups between Thai female fighters and Western female fighters, because the Thais are not even allowed to fight in the way that they're actually the most skilled at.
We see this when we watch Super Champ, which is a former opponent of mine, Nang Hong.
I don't want to get into details.
She's an amazing fighter in the Thai style.
She's a backwards fighter.
And she cannot not do that on this platform.
And she'll lose every time, because, just so you understand, if you don't follow this, just to broad brush it, in Thai traditional scoring, once you have the lead, you retreat and you defend the lead. It's like once you take the ground in military parlance, you build a castle, right? And now you own the land. If you retreat in these action-oriented new forms of scoring, you will lose. When Max first came out, they literally wrote in the rules in Thai for the Thais, if you go backwards, you will lose, like as an actual rule. And look, much good has come of this. I think also much dangerous bad too. And it's good to track both of these. But one of the things that has happened is the main opportunities for these Thai female fighters are these exciting Chon shows, but that are geared so that Westerners can win or compete at a very high level.
Right. Instead of taking Westerners and being like, you're in Thailand, fight in the Thai style, it's taking Thai women and saying, you're on this show, fight in a Western style. In a Western style.
And many of them can't do it. Some of them train for it and try. Like there's a great Thai female fighter, Saifa, who's now, what's her name? This tall Chiang Mai.
Saifa.
Oh, Saifa. Well, then why do you look at me like I'm crazy?
Because you said no, and I'm like, I think you mean Saifa.
Saifa, knee fighter, very experienced, but at the time was not training a lot. But her coach, I think it was her boyfriend at the time, told her to just spam that right hand, throw that right hand, something she does not do. Not many Thai female fighters do. And she adapted to Super Champ in a couple of fights with a kind of like taking on a style that was the Western style. And Fairtex, for instance, had, with Stamp and others, have had great success just creating this spamming right hand, because punches score very highly in these kinds of promotions, and they don't score highly in Muay Thai traditional scoring. So Thais have had to adapt to it. So I guess the point is, okay, I get too excited. One of the things that developed out of this was Thai female fighters kind of had become point fighters. So they were very good at winning in the Thai style. Why are you looking at me like you...
I 100% agree. I think that the huge difference between male fighting and female fighting in Thailand, and they are not similar, is that women fight way more sporting, like it's a point thing rather than a like true dominance thing.
They became point fighters, and they dominated in the scoring columns.
Yes.
And they learned how to manage rounds, and some of it is very high art. Tanan Chinook's a great example of a point fighter who's just artful. But Loma was a point fighter. Lomani, a point fighter. Like beautiful point fighters. Like it's a branch of Muay Thai that they had mastered. And in a large part, these entertainment shows and forcing these Thai female fighters to not go backwards, to clash, to brawl, to throw combinations over and over and over and over again, helped develop female Thai fighting. Because it was a hole. It honestly was a hole in them. Even though they were very good in the traditional style, it was a hole in their fighting. A lot of them did not have very good head defense even. A lot of them were mostly kickers because kicks score very highly. And so the entertainment shows actually kind of like grew the skill level of Thai female fighters. So that's the first thing. So that's a good thing about the whole thing. But you still presently have on these shows rule sets skewed towards Westerners, and you don't have the new talent, the new blood of Thai female fighters that are the next wave of great fighters. And you might not get that.
Yes, but there's also, because of the success of these shows, Thai shows like Lady Fight and Karat, where you have Thai scoring for the most part.
Yeah, it's all Thais, yeah.
And those are smaller women generally, and they're getting those kind of, it's not as viewed, but it's still happening at the same time.
Well, that is interesting. She's speaking to a Karat promotion that just started. We'll see if it even if it collapses or not. COVID crushed it. But that's so far only Thais on Thai, national kind of concept of weights and rankings and belts. So there's the possibility of growing Thai female fighting in the Thai tradition, also running parallel to these entertainment shows. So this is the thing. It's like in order for it to be the golden age, you literally need to have like 5 Petchi jaws.
So we might be waiting on a golden age.
Yeah, and you also need the talent on the Western side.
Yeah.
Right. Petchi Jaw is a generational fighter. She's already at the age where Thai female fighters would already start retiring.
Yeah.
So you need younger than Petchi Jaws.
Well, she kind of did retire from Muay Thai until she got on Thai Fight. She was doing the boxing team, so.
Yeah, and that's one reason why she's kind of an interesting fighter now, is that many Thai female fighters don't really have hands and head defense and can fight in that kind of aggressive kind of Chon way.
Stay in the pocket.
And stay in the pocket, and she can because she was on the boxing team for like 4 years or something like that and fought internationally. So I guess in talking about the age of female fighting, I'm always looking at the processes that exist that are creating the great fighters. Sao Sing was created, or Jia was created, or Dong Kam Fa was created, honestly, in the side bet scene of the provinces. Not through big promotions and organizations awarding belts and creating rankings. It's in the betting side bet scene of Thailand. That's historically where the great talents of Thai female fighting have come. And you just get a handful of gems that come through. The question is, at this time in female fighting, almost all the top fighters are old of that. They were created 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Are the processes in place right now that are just about to release a great Thai fighter? And we've seen some kind of false starts, like when you fought and beat Pornpon, who was this like wild talent out of the South and had beaten everybody, and her tricky little manager pretended like she was nobody to Sylvie, lied about her weight, and this manager uses Sylvie as the gateway drug to fighting Westerners. He like brings these monsters out of the provinces, lies about them, and then he's like, "Don't worry, beginner." And then Sylvie sometimes beats them. She beat Pornpon. They pretended that fight never happened. She was undefeated, and they brought her into the super champ environment, and she just could not handle the size differences.
Well, she did well for her first couple of fights, and then she
I thought she lost her first fight.
No, she was great in her first fight.
Oh, second fight not good? But
this one she fought Smilla, she just got.
Yeah, and Smilla's a monster.
Which is kind of the same thing that happened to the previous phenom of Nongyu, who was just like skyrocketing, right?
Yeah.
And she actually did well in her first fight against Becca, and then her second fight when she got her nose broken, she won, but it like broke something in her. Like she just was not.
Well, we don't know that, but we're guessing.
Yeah. She took like 6 months off to heal, and when she came back, she was just different.
Yeah, and then she got knocked out by. What's her name?
Wonder Girl.
Wonder Girl.
Yeah.
But we're saying that the provincial side bet world, which traditionally has produced these like 5 or 6 gems, it produced Loma, it produced Loma Ni. This side bet world only produces 4 or 5. And we don't even know if it's producing them anymore, because the ones that have bubbled up honestly couldn't take the wave of Western size and strength.
Yeah.
Right? And so for this to be the golden age, it can't be the golden age, because the golden age was about Thailand. In the male golden age was like the strength of Muay Thai in Thailand provincially in the like 1,000 gyms across the country was just bubbling up with talent, where just nobody fighters like Yo Kun Pan could come in to become a 2-time stadium champion. Like, just the talent was bubbling up in Thailand.
Yeah.
And instead, what we have is a great hype promotional setup that has favored Muay Thai female fighting, and has even led to Lumpini now letting females, creating cards where females, it hasn't happened yet, but it seems like it's really going to happen like in this next month, that this next, that women are now able to step into and fight in the Lumpini ring, which was something that was, you made it a goal of yours to win a Lumpini belt like 4 years ago or something, 3-4 years ago. And at the time, it was literally like just pick an absolutely impossible thing.
Yep.
And that is changing. You have a lot to say about that. You don't have anything.
I don't have a lot to say about that. It's
well, let's put it this way. Can you check the time? Sorry, guys. Did you just kill it?
I did.
Wasn't it 4 minutes though?
Oh, there we go.
Oh, good. One of the things that you've talked about is, in order for women to have fight at Lumpini Stadium, what Lumpini Stadium is and means had to radically change.
Yes.
And so, even though this is a huge historic signal that that female fighting is being seen in a very, very different way in Thailand.
Yeah.
So much of what Lumpini was had to be altered by history. And it was altered before this.
It's been like this for a while.
Since it literally moved from the old location when it was a different stadium. They kept the name, they kept the traditions and everything else, but everything has been morphing. So Thailand, the pressures of entertainment Muay Thai have really changed Thailand's Muay Thai, not always for the better, but part of that was opening the door to female fighters. And notably, at least at the time of this filming and conversation, the female fights on that card,
on the first card,
on the first card, is 4 Lumpini belts, supposedly we've seen it said, and 4 WBC world title. One of them is a fighter who's the latest percolating fighter, Sine John.
Right,
She's
16.
She's like the next talent. People have been asking, have been trying to set Sylvie up with her for a long time. On that card, most of the fights are 3-round fights. So
there have not been 3-round fights at Lumpini before.
You don't think so ever? No, there must have been a couple.
Maybe, but
like
there would never be like 3.
Yeah, the card would never have been a dominantly 3-round card. So
and the main event.
So you're really having a very different kind of promotion happen at Lumpini Stadium, which includes the doorway for female fighters. And for us, it means a fucking lot that it's 2 female Thai fighters fighting.
And they're a little bit the types that we've just talked about, which is Sine John is this like rising star 16-year-old hot ticket right now to like get on board.
Yeah.
And then Buo Kao is 21. She's been fighting in the circuits of Isan since at least 6 years that we remember, when she was fighting Pechi Jha like 5-6 years ago.
Yeah. So this is like out of the fabric. These 2 girls are not hyped, picked by a big gym, and they're named hype in any way. These 2 girls are out of the fabric of provincial side bet fighting. This is the talent that is being made
as the first.
And I don't think it's golden age level.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
Like, we'll see how things develop, but my concern about whether this is the golden age, I think it's a silver age because it's creating these opportunities and these fights and situations. But the talent level, we have to find ways of growing the talent and the skill level of the Thai female fighter.
Yeah.
It's all on the back of the Thai female fighter. We have to stop being like, I came to Thailand and I beat a Thai, or I won a belt against a Thai.
I feel like there's less of that now already.
There is.
And women are staying here longer, which was not so much a thing.
Very true, and they're creating relationships and connections with Thai female fighters, and Thai female fighters are more present on social media, so we feel more connected. You know their names, their Instagrams. But when I say that, I'm actually talking outside of Thailand, not how people are in Thailand.
Yeah.
There still are people commenting on Sylvie's like 268 fights, tend to be Europeans. They're like, fighting bar girls. Like, literally, you are 15, 20 years back in time, dude. Like, there is a vein of talent and culture in this country, and I'm like, we have to actively nurture and grow that capacity somehow. And if it only means celebrating Thai female fighters and appreciating their skill, and also appreciating that in these promotions, got to finish this segment. In these promotions, these Thai female fighters are fighting against their own rule set.
Yeah.
They're doing things, I don't know if people have eyes for this, but they're doing things, they're very uncomfortable doing. All their instincts are telling them once they have the lead, retreat, check, block. They can't do that anymore. It would be like fighting.
It's not only that, but it's like, have defense. Like, also have defense. And they're like, no, none of that. Only offense.
Only offense, only offense.
Like, it's not even only strategic.
It would be like you had a boxing competition, a boxing rule set where you're like, you can't block punches. It's only punch, but do not ever block a punch.
You block, you lose.
You block, you lose.
A punch, you lose.
No, do you know what I mean? It's like, I just want everyone to appreciate just how far these Thai female fighters are stretching themselves. Yeah. The Western fighters are fighting in a comfort zone. Like, some of them maybe are like, I wanted to be very traditional and I'm being forced to fight forward and I'm not that kind of fight. Some Western fighters might be like that too, but the Thai female fighters have been fighting a certain way since they're 9 years old. So if we want to get to the golden age, we have to rising tide kind of thing. Okay, that sounds good. Okay.
I have to get a hat because the sun is on me, so that's why there's a change. See if you can spot the difference.
If you're listening on audio, listen for the hat. Can you hear how the like voice bounces off the
bill?
Off the bill. Thank you. Vocabulary lapse. Yeah. My hat, Sylvie Chemical X hat. I honestly wear this everywhere I go.
He does. It's true.
You can get these on Sylvie's store. All the earned profits go to the Crews and Legends. We don't make any money on it, but it's great too if you like supporting Sylvie. These hats in 2 colors are available, and I'm wearing Sylvie's South Knock Line cow shirt, Miss Gangster knee.
Kevin sports my merch a lot.
Well, this is the weird thing. I actually wear this stuff every single day.
He's not exaggerating. It's every day. This is Kevin's outfit.
It's either the South Knock Line, like your Muay Thai stuff, or it's the Kara Hot shirt, or the Yo Kumpan shirt.
Yep.
These are really comfortable T-shirts. Like, I honestly am not like sporting the merch. They're like. He's
also home, so nobody's seeing it.
I don't care. I would, even if I'm out, I would wear these.
Like the worst spokesbottle. You just wear it in your house.
Well, what do you mean?
I'm saying
I don't take it off if I go.
I'm saying you actually wear it because you like it, rather than like wear this in the store for the Instagram or something.
Totally.
Like,
it's very funny. It's like if you see me, like, oh, they're putting the merch on. And I'm like, no, I literally live in the merch. I have like, we should look at my closet and it's like 10 shirts. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. They're very comfortable.
Good.
That's all I want is a comfortable shirt. And
the things you love. The me and Yo Kumpan and Kara Hut, like your favorite things.
The 3 best. I need a Diesel Noy thing.
Shirt. Yeah. Complete the set.
All right. Okay, we're switching gears. That was quite a little bit of a rant, but it's like the story of female fighting is kind of like built up. We haven't really talked about a lot of Muay Thai.
I like that if it's the Silver Age, I'm Witchanoy.
Oh, baby. That's right. That is, you are Witchanoy.
Yod Moy Amata.
Is that the immortal?
The immortal, yeah.
The immortal. Oh, baby. You're so historic. It's so beautiful. It feels like people don't even fully understand, but it's like...
This is just an anecdote. I'm just going to throw it in here.
Good.
We were filming with Karahat. We had him go through the book the same way we had Diesel Noy go through the book.
Which we will probably not publish.
Really?
Baby, all he says is, I heard of him. I heard of him.
It's so cute.
I heard of him. He is adorable, but the guy is not a talker.
We'll do it.
Maybe it's a bonus session or something.
But he gets to Bokao, and he's like, before Bokao, fighters just looked normal. Like, we just had normal bodies. But then Bokao came, and he's all, like, jacked and ripped, and now everyone wants to look, like, completely shredded. And I'm like, have you seen Witchanoy? Like, Witchanoy was so shredded.
Yeah.
And just, like, this farmer strong for, like, 2 decades, 3 decades or something.
Well, also, Bokao does the, like, flex thing that nobody would ever do.
Yeah, Witchanoy's like, I woke up like this, whereas Bokao's like, look at my elastic band thing. Yeah, it's not the same.
Yeah. Okay, so lead the way on this topic. We're switching gears. No more about the history of female Muay Thai.
I forgot what we're talking about. Oh, defending. Yeah, so a couple weeks ago, it doesn't matter time frame, I did this vlog. I had come back from training and I was really disappointed in myself, but also proud of myself because I had like coupled these 2 things together in how I dealt with a sparring partner who was just doing too much. Like, he was much bigger than me, which is the case of all of my sparring partners, but like what he was doing was just too much. And what I need out of sparring for myself is not toughening up. Like, I don't need toughening up sparring anymore. So I basically called it. I was like, no more of this. This is not working for me. And I shook his hand and came home, and like 10 minutes after this quitting, I felt fine. Like, I felt like I totally could have like gotten back into it. I was just at a like emotional peak at that moment. So I made this vlog talking about how I was actually happy for having defended myself because I don't need to be toughened up. I don't need to like stick to it kind of thing with someone who's being more or less uncool. But then I also don't want to give into this is uncomfortable for me and so I want to quit, because quitting becomes a habit. And there's this razor thin line between defending yourself, which is standing up for myself and being like, you're being uncool and I don't need this. That's standing up for myself, and it took me a long time to even be able to do that.
Do you feel that way?
Yes.
Okay. Well, tell that story a little bit. Talk about that. But don't look at me crazy. This is a podcast. Like, I'm not. You feel like in sparring in the past you would.
I would tough it out.
Okay.
And like, it would not be good for me. There, for example, in Chiang Mai, when Den would punch my stomach, and he's just being a dick. And like, to a degree, yes, learn to defend your stomach. But it gets to a point where you actually build bad habits because that's too much for you. So
should you have been like, enough, I'm not going to do this anymore? Like, what would have been the appropriate?
To a degree up there, yes. I should have been like, you're just being a dick. This isn't even shaping me in a good way anymore. Like, enough of that. But I would never stand up for myself that way.
Yeah.
I've had problems at Petrungrung with young kids who are bigger than me. Like, Mech was like 14, but huge, like 60 kilos. And he can actually hurt me because of his size and because of his youth. If he
got angry, like
yes.
if he like.
And there were times that he tried because he's emotional or whatever.
Yeah.
And I would be like, if you want to go hard on me, I'm going to defend myself and go hard on you. That's standing up for myself.
Right.
But then there's all this complicated stuff that's like, you should be learning to control yourself. You should not be gyrone about anything. You should be taking this opportunity to shape yourself, whatever. So this fine line of what happened the other day was me being like, this is not working for me, stop, is good because I'm standing up for myself, and so I'm defending myself. But if that becomes a habit where every time you start getting on the emotional edge or someone is better than you or someone's bigger than you, you're like, stop, 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 this is not helping shaping me because it's uncomfortable, then you're defending your weakness. You're not defending yourself. You're defending your weakness.
Hard to know where that line is.
But you know, like
you don't know.
You do, though. I do.
No, otherwise you wouldn't have been ashamed that you'd walked out of there.
I was okay.
You were of two minds.
Yes.
It's not like you really know which way to go.
Because I was like, this time okay.
Yeah.
But if I keep doing that, no, then you're defending your weakness.
I'm just saying there's no rule.
Oh, for sure.
For knowing which it is.
It's between a 4 and 5.
It's kind of like you have to feel a way. It's very difficult because you basically have to feel what is the center line on which you want to walk and when are you going too far in either direction. Right? It was easier for many years, even though the Den thing was a fucking difficult thing. What you did for 8 years in Thailand was you just fucking threw yourself into a gym, sometimes more than one gym, and you just hooked yourself to the plow and pulled the plow.
Yeah.
And so protecting yourself, not protecting yourself wasn't even a question much of the time. There were times when a sparring thing would get out of control or something. You had to make decisions about, I know you were disappointed about one sparring like mock fight that you were like, I did not respond well to that.
And then I didn't get those anymore.
Wait, tell a little bit of that story.
I think it was against Lam Choi, who, when I first got to the gym, was smaller than me. And then he grew, and I didn't. And I think at the point that this mock sparring happened, he was starting to be bigger than me. Not a lot, but maybe like 2-3 kilos, something like this.
Yeah.
And
taller.
He's a teenage boy. He has these ego defenses that are in place that I simply don't have as...
That's very abstract, academic sounding. What's an ego defense? Or what are you talking about?
It is sexism. It is that, but it's not a like finger wagging, you should be over this kind of thing. A teenage boy being bettered by a woman has a degree of losing face that I will never have.
In public, like everybody's watching.
It's in the gym. Everyone's It's a mock fight. Everyone stops what they're doing.
Yeah, so everybody knows they would have a fight. They would literally have a fight, which is sparring, padded sparring, but it's pretty hard, and people are cheering as if they're in a fight.
They're gambling.
They're pretending that it's like, it has all the things of a fight. It's not supposed to be 100% though, right? It's like 85% or something.
Yeah. Like the trying to win is about as close to 100%, whereas real sparring, you don't have to try to win all the time.
Yeah.
But the way that people will on the outside, the people who are creating this scene, the way that they will amp something up to shame one of the fighters, or to kind of like play up what one of the fighters is doing, it's very exaggerated. And so the shame exaggeration in those situations can be very high.
So he had a lot at risk.
As a boy, he had a lot at risk. And as a woman, I had less. But my risk is that if I don't meet it, if I don't live up to it, they're like, oh, she's a woman, she can't do it. Like, that's her nature, like, she can't hold it. And I emotionally did not handle...
Was it like 4 or 5 years ago, right?
It was a long time ago. I did not handle being bettered by him in an emotional way very well. And so I just did not get sparring anymore. And that was something that I learned all the way back up at Lana, was if I have a fucking attitude about clinching, I never got any clinching. I never got any sparring. So I was very inexperienced in it. And when you're inexperienced in anything, regardless of your age, you're kind of immature when you first start. You have this kind of volatility because you're just not set. Your mold is messed up. And so even if it's super hard, you kind of have to suck it up and be like, thank you, trainer, for giving me that opportunity, even though you want to cry. Go home and cry, that's fine, but you have to be like, thank you, that was good for me, even if it wasn't really very good for you. Otherwise, you won't get it again. And I'm at a point where I'm still like, my bones in fighting and my bones in sparring are not the same. Like, my experience in sparring, I've sparred a lot in the past year now.
But still developing.
Still developing. I still have not built this kind of like laminated
Well, when you're in a fight, generally you're just like, you have a thickness of hide because you're allowed to do whatever it takes to win.
Yes, and I made a point to go back.
Here, let me tip this back.
I made a point to go back and like show my face the day after this happened and be like, no bad feelings.
What happened?
The guy being a dick and me being like, enough, and leaving.
It's a very difficult thing.
But the trainer was like, he was being uncool. Like, from the outside, he was agreeing. Which means that there are times, and I think it was Amy Davis pointed this out with her husband at the time.
Amy Davis, historic female Muay Thai fighter, American 105-pound fighter, who was one of your first inspirations.
She's amazing. But she trained with her husband, Darren. They're not together, but her husband at the time, Darren. And she was laughing about something I was saying with working with Kevin, which is she's like, I will feel like Darren is such a dick, like hitting me. I'm like, why are you hitting me so hard? And then she'll look at the video and he's like,
tap, touch.
And this happens in sparring. We have a blog post about this, which is that like, you actually don't know how hard you're hitting at times, and like your defenses are crazy, and so you're like, I'm going light and he's being a jerk, but you're actually like hitting really hard. So I have within my mind this understanding that my perception of it might be shaped by how raw I feel or like how emotional I am about the dominance or any of these things. So sometimes an outside eye can tell you, yeah, that was uncool or not. Like, there are times I'm sparring with Yodkun Pan where I'm like, this is unwithstandable. And the reality of it is, like, it's not that bad. It's just I'm very raw.
Totally. What I'm kind of interested in talking about a little bit is, and I'm not sure how many other people will appreciate this, but as a physically small female, she's literally, if she was her ideal fight weight is like 97 pounds. As a physically small female, you are not able to participate in one of the main lessons of sparring that then becomes like out of control, which is in sparring, you learn how to regain control of the situation by imposing yourself physically on someone. So if someone's being a dick, you rip off 2 huge body punches and they stop being a dick. You don't have that ability, physical ability.
I do.
No, not.
When I used to clinch with men.
Clinching is not the same thing as sparring.
But the knees hurt. I can impose pain. I can't physically impose like space.
Sylvie, against that guy that you were boxing with, you could not have just been like, oh, you're being a dick to me? You're going on the ground.
That's true. That's
like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
But that's a dimension of what fighting is. is about physically imposing dominance over someone who's trying to impose it on you. And part of the problem, the difficulty is, as a physically small, you're just fucking physically small, and so many of the people you train against are 65 kilo, like way.
Yeah,
it's not like you're training
not
like
20 pounds, 20 kilos,
like
bigger than me.
Way out of things. And so the only way to control the situation sometimes is not as a fighter, but as a human being and saying words. And so you run this kind of dichotomy where you're like, I'm being physically dominated and being imposed upon. The fighterly thing is to retake control physically, but I literally don't have the power or the skill set to just fucking dominate this huge size disparity. And so you either have to stay in the game and tough it out and learn how to take punishment, which fucking sucks.
But you do have to do.
Sometimes, or you step out of the fighter game and you defend yourself as a person with words and actions. And you're like, none of that.
Yeah.
You're like, and it's very difficult because not a normal, let's say a man sparring another man within 10 pounds of each other, they don't ever have to stop being a fighter to defend themselves. And I think it's a very important thing for women to be aware of, because they have to make these choices sometimes. You cannot just go take beatings.
Yeah.
It's not good for you. You learn submission in a weird way. Or you learn like brawly, humorous anger in response. Like, it's not the thing of what Muay Thai is. And particularly small-bodied female fighters have this line to figure out for themselves. And it changes, the line moves.
But you do have to put in the work to figure it out, and because the line moves, you have to keep figuring it out. You cannot, and I think there's a tendency for this, and we talk about this, we get annoyed by this, that because you're different or you have a set of qualities that make you stand out from whatever the norm is where you are, like we were saying at the beginning, you have to be really honest about what you're defending. You cannot take what you just said about me being small and being picked upon and have me be like, well, I just have this get out of jail free card of like everyone's being a jerk, and so I can just stand up for myself and shut it down. No, you can't. Like, you do have to find...
So how do you find that line? Because you're the one who finds that line.
You keep finding it, and you cry and feel shame in the process of finding it, because sometimes you overstep it, sometimes you're shy of it.
It's almost like you keep missing the line, but you have to miss it too far on this side and then miss it too far on that side. You're never really right at the line, and you have to create standards for yourself. Like, I think when you pulled out of that dick sparring and you're like, this isn't good for me, you had responding to a standard you had set for yourself. And I think another dimension of this, which is maybe worth talking about, is that women are often drawn to the fighting arts who've been victimized, who've been fucking physically abused or violated in some way. And so enduring the fucking sparring or the relentless pad work or endless things on the bag is a way of like hardening oneself in areas that they were vulnerable maybe, and also kind of like masochistically punishing themselves against violence in a weird way. And so you have to be very careful that you just are not rehearsing damage. Like, I feel like one of the evolutions that you've had is that you fucking like change yourself to the fucking plow as a way to like alchemize a lot of personal pain and vulnerability. And now, because COVID changed fucking all the circumstances, there's no plow to harness yourself to, and you have to make choices about how you're going to train, who you're going to train with, and is it good for me or not. And I feel like you're evolving from this like previous much simpler way of going forward, which was just toughing things out.
Well,
It's a fucking complicated emotional thing.
it's weird in that, like, with a superhero or something, they have some kind of super ability. That's what makes them a superhero. But they also have a super vulnerability that they're always kind of, like, edging around kind of thing. And for someone like me who, like, can withstand a lot or, like, will take a lot or suffer a lot quietly,
Yeah.
that's a superpower to a degree.
Yeah.
But all of that and not hitting back
Yeah.
is a weakness. It's like your strength has this weak side.
Yes.
You have to learn how to hit back.
Yeah.
And hitting back kind of necessarily involves a lot of really bad flavors in your mouth and risky things that hurt in a way that, like, just taking it doesn't hurt and things like that. So it's
also...
It's a kind of honesty that's really unpleasant.
Unpleasant. And if it's okay to bring it up, but I know that there's things that you can evolve as a smaller fighter, like your pull away on being attacked and you roll to the right side and you basically expose yourself to attack, but because you're small, attacks stop. And as a female fighter, you can learn to use your smallness or your femininity to control violence. There is this incredible, I'll never forget, we've talked about it in the past. There was this incredible moment, there were two moments in the Gina Carano Cyborg fight where there were two moments. One is Gina Carano is like mounted on Cyborg, about to rain down punches, and she just freaks out and gets up.
For no reason.
She just was not comfortable there. If she was comfortable there, she probably could have ended the fight. I don't know if in her head there was like, don't go to the ground with Cyborg or something, but she was mounted and she felt something and she was like, what?
Restart.
Restart, like, get up. She could have maybe finished the fight there. Fight got up and then Cyborg punched her, by my recollection, to the cage, and I could feel that Gina Carano, and this is not a criticism, and this is very early in the evolution of MMA, but I could feel that in her training, she's used to taking 3 or 4 punches, coming at her, defending herself, and then stopping.
Well, the person stops as well.
The person stops, but because she signals in some small way, stop. Like, it could be a dropping of the hands. I noticed you have a roll to the right, that these little signals, especially when you train with somebody over and over and over again, how you choose to stop in training becomes very habitual and unconscious. And I'm like, and I could see in that fight, Cyborg does not do that.
I remember that. I remember watching it on TV and you were like, that's from training. Nobody has hit her like that.
Nobody continued to hit her.
You blamed her trainers. You were like, that's on her trainers right there.
Well, it's not just her trainers. It's the weird unconscious language between yourself and your trainer where you signal, okay, I learned my lesson. We start over. Let's start over. And it's like, it's the trainer's fault because the trainer has to see that, recognize it, and then train it out. That's ideally what they're supposed to do. But sometimes it's just like you feel like, I just want my fighter to take 3-punch combination and then that's good. But that's not real. And I could feel from Cyborg the way she was fighting in that fight. She's used to fucking, there are no outs. There are no exits. But it's fucking complicated because, like I said, the female fighter sometimes does not have the ability to fight their way out of a bad position and impose themselves on somebody, to rip a hook and put somebody on the ground and be like, fuck you, you're getting out of line. They have to, better is to just be like, stop, this isn't working, and use your language and your words. Not good are these like little secret signs of let's start over, because those become ingrained, and then an opponent doesn't, they're safe words, and then the opponent goes, I don't notice your safe word.
Pineapple.
Pineapple, pineapple, pineapple.
Yeah.
Hi, there's something very beautiful about this because, oh, you checking the time?
Yeah.
You want to say something?
Just that it requires so much self-awareness. Like, it is not a someone can tell you what that line is,
and
someone else can enforce that line for you.
Like last week, you should have done this, and in the exact same situation this week, you should do the other thing. Like, how do you call yourself in your own bullshit without being fucking harsh against yourself? Like, you don't want to build a fucking, like, you're a piece of shit, you're not a fighter. But like, you don't want to build that dialogue.
It's also incredibly emotionally complex. I remember at the sparring circle in New York that we created, it was all women.
So amazing.
There was like no sparring opportunities, and so we created this all-female from like any gym, come meet at Art and Sweet Science in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, yeah.
Yeah, so Sarah Romulo.
Yeah, you don't have to name names, but...
She had boxing experience. She's like this very, like, in terms of where I was at the time and where she was at, just like this, and she was so much bigger than me, and so it was like, you're working with someone who has no head defense and doesn't know what they're doing. She's just going to pump her jab. She's just going to work on her jab. Theoretically, on paper, this is like such a responsible, beautiful thing to do. If you're going against someone smaller, who you're better than, any of these things, work on your defenses, work on just your jab, just your hook, just your blocks, whatever the thing is, that's how you do it. When you bring insecurity and whatever the thing is into it, my experience of that was how patronizing that she's only using her jab against me, like I can't feel good about anything that I'm doing. And I still get that now. I'll be going against Dee, who's like 65 kilos.
Stadium fighter.
And sometimes he's going pretty hard and like locking me out. And someone will be like, hey, reminder, she's much smaller than you. You don't need to be going like that. And he'll take it down. And then all of a sudden I feel bad where I'm like, you don't have to like be all like baby.
Well, now you seem to be arguing the other side of the coin.
I'm saying you have to be honest with yourself. Like, I don't want Yodkun Pan to like not throw something that he can throw, but I don't want him to rip it in this like I'm trying to kill you way either. Like there's a chemistry involved on both sides, and it's very hard to get that right.
But you have to manage yourself. You can't manage the other person.
Yes.
You have to be like, okay, they're just throwing the right kick for me, keeping it simple. I'm going to work
the right kick.
I'm going to work on this thing and not take it as a personal insult.
Totally. I'm saying that what's going on in your head is what that razor thin line of are you defending yourself or are you defending your weakness, where that takes place is like a mental state. It's not actually a physical.
And it's very hard to do this for yourself, because ideally the dream is that that a coach, a very experienced coach, sees when you're defending your weakness and sees when you're defending yourself, and kind of like modulates your training and your partners and everything else. But many times women do not have ideal training partners or have a great variety of training experiences, and a lot of what you're doing as a female fighter is trying to maximize what you can get out of very ill-fitting parts.
Totally.
And so you become your own coach at a certain point, even though you're listening to your coach.
Yeah.
You're trying to set standards for yourself that you want to reach for. It's a very interesting thing when you are the one who's like saying no. You have to use words to say no. Mm. Okay, sounds good.
No.
Okay, switching up topics. This is about fighting in Thailand for reals. How to enter this? Sylvie has expressed probably more than one time that when she goes fighting on the circuit and in various locations, she's a rare fighter of Westerners in Thailand, in that she's developed a network of connections where she books her own fights. She doesn't have a gym booking her fights, managing career, finding favorable matchups, and the big reason why we do not have gyms molding her career is that the general shape of molded careers for Thais and for Westerners does not lead to the kind of Muay Thai fighter she wants to become. She doesn't want to win a world title belt. She doesn't want to get to the point where her gym is like, no one can fight her, and basically fight less and less and kind of be the king of the hill. She wants to reach for a Muay Thai as a female fighter that just does not exist. And so we have to kind of jerry-rig a process of fighting that will allow her to experience enough fights, literally hundreds and hundreds, to reach for a Muay that just, there is no process for. And a large part of this has been removing ourselves from the gym promoter dynamics that define almost every other female fighter in Thailand. The result of this is she has a huge network of promoters and people that want her on her cards, and she books her own cards, and we travel all over the country to stadiums we've never seen before, to sometimes promoters we've never dealt with before.
A ring in the middle of a field that GPS is like, what?
Yeah. And honestly, it's some of the most beautiful fight experiences we've had in Thailand. I would say they are the most beautiful. One of the things she has stated many times is that in these fights, at times, she just does not listen to her corner. And the obvious reason why she doesn't listen to her corner is they don't know who the hell she is. Like, they look at her, she's a small little fighter, she tells them she's a Muay Thai fighter, but nobody fucking understands.
They don't even know that necessarily.
They don't even know that?
Ring. Yeah.
Very often we go to these setups and the promoter has given us a corner, and honest to God, these are just very unusual fight situations, and Sylvie fights like 80% of her fights this way. Stating that she does not listen to her corner in many of these circumstances, and we'll go into why she doesn't listen to her corner, apparently got out into social media, and people who are experts in Muay Thai, like Westerner expert types, objected to this horrible thing that Sylvie doesn't listen to her corner, and this is dangerous, and blah, blah, blah. The concern trolling on this. And this is the thing. This is not really about the complaint of experts. It's about talking about how far off the map Sylvie goes. Like, off the map of what normal Westerners, even very experienced Westerners, experience. She is like, pioneer type word is way out there. And there probably will never be another Sylvie, because the perfect storm of opportunities that led to her being able to book her own fights evolved over many years.
And out of necessity.
Out of necessity many times.
People don't face often.
Yeah, and by our own choices, I don't think you could purposefully do what you did.
Well, there's also a particularly lame angle to this criticism of me and what I do, in that I'm not advising anyone to do what I do.
Well, that's kind of the other part of this. That's really interesting.
I am the queen of don't fucking tell anyone how to do anything. Like,
totally. And I think it's also really important to say is, like, in normal, I'm going to say it's adventure tourism Muay Thai, where you come to Thailand, you lock into a gym, you listen to your crews in training, your crews take you to fight, listen to your corner.
Yeah, they know you. They know
like, it's part of also the fabric of culture of respect. It's the way of fighting in line with gambling.
It's how gyms work.
It's how gyms work. Sylvie's not telling people, do what I do, although she is historically reporting what she does because it's something that's never been done. Mm. And so I want to talk a little bit about this, like, why don't you listen to your corner when we go to these, very frequently go to these fights where corners literally don't know you?
Well, you just answered it, because they don't know me. Like, I don't, like, wholesale not listen to my corner.
Yeah.
I don't wholesale not listen to gamblers. Like,
yeah.
When you fight for real out in the countryside at a festival fight, people are up to the skirt of the ring. Like, they are touching you when you're getting your water between rounds. Like, gamblers are, like, grabbing your leg and they're like, punch. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a puncher. Like, that's not my thing. I can punch. Sometimes they'll say something that I'm like, meh, yeah, that's actually a good idea. It doesn't matter that it was a gambler versus like the guy who I'm paying to be my corner. It's good advice.
Totally.
So it doesn't matter whether that's terrible advice coming from my corner or from a gambler. I'm like, whatever. Like, that's not going to fit with me. These people, I'm not like, I'm so amazing, nobody can tell me what to do.
Yeah.
It's that I know myself as a fighter. I know what my strengths are. And honest to God, people who actually know me quite well will just look at my size and my whatever I am, and they're like, femur, like be little, be dancing around. Master K was my first teacher. For a year, he was like, be little and jump around. And it's like, tanks don't do that. Like, tanks don't jump around. So if you can be like, this guy's telling you to not be a tank, and you're like, I'm a tank. I can do tank things.
Yeah.
Are you being an asshole for being like, I'm not gonna like pogo stick it? I'm a tank. Like,
totally.
I don't do those things.
And a large part of this is fighting to win and gambling. There are the way that gambling works in most Muay Thai situations is there's a story being told about who's winning, and very often when it's point fighting back and forth, and when a fighter gets in the lead, that then their corner is like back off or fight in a way that you preserve your lead. It's a conversational kind of Muay Thai. What we learned over hundreds of fights now is that Sylvie is this incredible tank, and that is not the way to win a fight. So if you want to tell her how to win a fight, you don't know what she does, because nobody does what she does. We have a Hulk. Banner is about to become the Hulk.
Yeah.
And it's, well, go ahead, baby.
It's also worth saying that when I say I don't listen to my corner necessarily, or unanimously, or all the time, or wholesale, also means I don't not listen to them all the time. To take offense by this and say that this is like dangerous or horrible or disrespectful, honestly, a lot of my corners, including the corners who know me really well, don't necessarily give me a lot of advice. So when I say I'm not listening, it's two particular things and in small doses. Like, I fought a Kartchuk fight where the promoter gave me a Western cornerman who just liked hearing himself talk. Like, this guy knows shit about what I am or what I'm doing. And so he's giving advice that he literally would give to anyone they put in front of him. Like, any person he's cornering for, he's like, fight what I would do. And I'm like, I don't fight like you, and you don't know me, and you're not a good corner man to give that kind of advice. Well, if I was cornering for Pet Tay, I would not give her the advice of how I would beat this girl. I'd be like, look at how Pet Tay fights, look at how this girl's fighting, how is this gonna work? Sometimes cornermen give you really good advice that way, and you can be like, oh, they have body punch, that makes sense.
But a big other dimension of this is that corners in real Thai fights are not like corners in Western mentality.
Yeah, they're not like...
In Western mentality, it's like, I'm watching the fight and I'm decoding it, I'm gonna give you this
turn, pause,
secret...
pivot, step, pause.
like video game kind of crap. Thai corners say almost nothing. Actually, most Thai corners are actually children in the ring washing you down. And
yeah, how dare you not listen to that 8-year-old that's giving you water?
There's one guy who's kind of like the corner outside the ring, and he's just like tells you one small thing that might turn the fight, like kick more or pull in the clinch.
Remember Pidam? Block, 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 block.
Block, 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 block. The kinds of messages that come from Thai corners, and I don't know that Westerners that live and fight in Thailand and become coaches and corners even fully understand this. Thai corners give very minimal advice, generally.
Yes.
Not detailed. It's just this one thing could change the tide sometimes. But sometimes they're just like, do what you're doing.
It's just general strategic. It's like, you need to go forward in this round. Like, they're letting you know where you are on the scorecard, and they're like, you need to go.
Yeah, something like that.
I'm never, when I hear that, I'm never like, fuck you. I'm like, okay, well, that's how it's being read. But there are times when, and we talk about this quite a lot, I don't know if we've talked about it on Bones, but in voiceovers on my fights, in the 5th round, you look at your corner might be like, that's enough, like back off, or they might be like, go.
Yeah.
If you choose to look at your corner and they tell you to do something and you don't do what they tell you to do, that can be really bad. You
can lose a fight. You can lose a fight by looking at your corner.
Yeah.
Like on a close fight in the 5th round, and you'll see this in stadium fighters all the time. If you look over to the corner, that means that you yourself doubt about who's in the lead. And judges see that. And then if you look over to your corner and your corner says go, you are fucked.
You have to go.
You have to go. But it's not because you have to go because of the score or the gambling even.
It's because
it could just be that you expressed doubt, looked at your corner, and they're like, you're behind. Now it's locked in. There's no way to win this fight any other way than to go forward. And so sometimes not listening to your corner, you literally do not even look at your corner in the 5th round. And look, Sylvie's the most experienced Western fighter in the history of the sport in Thailand, and probably ever, anywhere. She has learned the shape of things that will win fights. She knows how long she can hold a 5th round on a dance-off. So if you tell her to dance off at the 20-second mark in the 5th round, it's a bad idea. It might be a great idea in the world, but it's like she knows when she has to be able to dance off because she has a certain limit of defensive capabilities.
And it took me a long time to learn that. I lost a lot of fights in the 5th round just because I did not know how to fight a 5th round.
Yeah.
And that's not because I wasn't listening to my corner. That's because I had to figure out what that sweet spot was.
And we also learned many times you listened to corners and fucking lost fights.
Yes.
Because it wasn't the right advice for the situation given who you are. And there is another dimension of this, which is that Sylvie fights in a very unexpected way, which is she's the underdog size-wise, sometimes by fucking 4 or 5 weight classes, and she wins by clinch dominance. And nobody thinks that's possible. Even people who know her and in the fight and you see the thing, you don't think that's how that fight's gonna go, and it's how you win all the time.
There's also a wide disparity in context that then just gets painted with a really broad brush.
Yeah.
It is, in Thai culture, in gym culture, in fight culture, incredibly important to have respect in this hierarchy.
Yeah.
That is, I do not deny that. Like, I am so...
You're over-respectful,
I'm very
honestly.
respectful to random people who are cornering for me as long as they're playing the correct role and what they're supposed to be doing. Very, very respectful in this way. I'm not disrespectful to almost anybody. But in the same way, and this is maybe like an example that's going to be a little bit out of left field from some people, there are like warnings and like paranoia and practices around your water being drugged if you're on like a big fight. So people will perform this paranoia of like, keep your water close to you, don't take water from anyone else. The chances of you being messed with or drugged are so incredibly low, but this practice and paranoia carries out wider. The degree to which you have to be like so deferential and obedient to your corner comes from huge gambling fights where they're really important. Your stadium fight in Chiang Mai or your like small fight out in the provinces, it will be applied in the like, you listen to your corner, but the like importance of that comes from something that you're not even close to. Like you are not touching the importance of obedience that they're talking about in reference to like a big money
you have
fight.
a huge gambling thing, then your gym is on the line and they're playing the whole gambling edge and everything. That's not a world any female fighter even lives in.
Yeah.
There's another small dimension of this, which is this incredible experience of going to a provincial fight and finding a corner among the mats, which is something we've done many, many times. You literally get there and you're like, look for a mat with kids on it.
Right.
Kid fighters and a family or something like that. I understand that Westerners feel like they're great corners or great coaches or whatever. These little gyms on mats, you come to a fight, there's like 15 mats. You take any coach, any like dad, uncle coach off the mat, it's like a picnic. You have someone who understands Muay Thai better than almost any Western coach. They are in the fabric of it. They live, eat, breathe, smoke it. They are such beautiful corners. So when there's another dimension of this is where you're like, you don't listen to your corner, but you like actually have this amazing corner who understands the situation so well. He understands he doesn't know anything about you other than what he's seeing, and he's cheering for you, and what he says is interesting and is sometimes worth listening to, because he's not trying to like ego define himself as like, I'm telling you how to win.
Yeah,
it's a huge difference.
There's also, when you're with your gym, when you're tied to your gym, which is not how I fight.
No.
I don't go with my gym. If you train at your gym, your trainer who knows you, who's been working on that hook thing with you all week, you go and you train, they tell you to do the hook thing, like 100%, these people know you, they'll come back and work on your weaknesses when you come back in the gym. This is not the context that I'm talking about. On top of this, anyone, whether they just met you 10 minutes before your fight and helped oil you, I wrap my own hands, these people do very, very little in terms of fight prep, they just go in. The degree to which they're stoked when I win, like we share this win.
Oh, it's very cool.
I don't lose a lot not listening to my corner. Like if they told me to do something and I didn't do it and I lost, that sucks. That doesn't happen very often.
It never happens.
Instead, they're like kick, femur, kick, right? And I'm like, I'm gonna lose a fight if I do that because I'm not that kind of fighter. And then I go in and I wreck someone. They're like, yes. Like often when I'm not listening, it's in early rounds.
Yeah. When you're establishing,
they start seeing what I am, and it starts aligning.
Oh, as soon as you lock on somebody and score a couple of knees, they're on the Sylvie boat.
There's also
they see it.
There's also I can't remember what fight number it was. It's in the 260s. It was not that long ago. It was my last Karchuk fight. My opponent's very big, and she's like head kicking me. And it's only a 3-round fight. And in round 3, I'm already like way ahead, but it's Karchuk, so there's no points. Like it's knockout or nothing. And Hippie, who doesn't know Karchuk, he knows me, but not like especially so. He's like, it's Sylvie, round 3, femur, technique. And I'm not gonna be like, fuck you, Hippie. But I'm like, how?
You shouldn't have listened to
like,
him though.
She's huge.
You shouldn't have listened to him. You did kind of like caught between you tried to do what he did, but you also did your thing too. You're like forward, you're caught between your things. I thought that was a bad, I'm gonna tell you, some of this, don't listen to your corner. I tell Sylvie before all these fights, don't listen to your corner. Because I know Sylvie likes to please people, and sometimes people can get in her ear. I'm like, Sylvie, you know how you win. Don't listen to your corner. We've had so much bad, educated corner advice, even from good Thais and whatnot. It's like, you know how to win. The way you fight. And it's like,
I don't remember lots of bad advice.
Baby, do you remember when, what's his name, I don't want to name him, told you to dance off the 5th round?
I do.
And we lost that fight?
Yeah.
And I was like, why are you listening to this guy? There's no reason.
Crazy.
It's almost like I've never seen you lose a fight where you went on your own and you should have done this other thing that was being told to you.
Yeah, no,
I've never seen it. It's 268 fights. This mentality though, this thing, you have to understand, this is way off the grid of adventure tourism. This is not the reality of other fighters. We're not saying other people.
I have never once advised other people don't listen to me.
Yeah, I'm saying this is not do this. But there is actually, in the advice column, there's an interesting thing, what Dieselnoy said. Do you remember what he said?
Dieselnoy says a lot of things,
yeah,
but he's like, you have to solve things yourself.
He said, he said something like, you're a fighter when you no longer have to listen to your corner, where you solve it yourself. You solve the problem yourself. You're not reliant on your fighter. And this fucking Dieselnoy, who was in very big, fucking high bet fights.
There was someone else. It wasn't Dieselnoy, but it's someone in the legend category that they told me, they're like, you're alone in the ring and you're fighting alone.
Yeah.
You go back to your corner, they have 2 minutes to tell you what they want to tell you, and then you're alone in the ring again.
What does that mean, though?
It's basically like they can give you input, but you're solving a person second by second in that ring. So you can be like, oh, I wasn't noticing that they're doing this, or that I should cut the ring off, or that I'm not cutting the ring off, or whatever the thing is. But there's no like joystick, like you do this combination and you win the fight. That's not how fighters work.
I also want to say that when we go to these provincial fights, this gonzo fighting style, like, it's so far away from managed tourism where the crew is like, I'll take care of you, you know, I'll give you the massage, like the whole thing.
There's nothing wrong with that either.
There's nothing wrong with it, but we left it for a reason, because that puts you down a path that's not your path. They try to control you in various ways, and your fate becomes locked on a rail. We left that. These other experiences of going and finding the kids and the dad on the mat have been some of the most beautiful Muay Thai experiences, at least for me. I don't know, you can say.
That Loy Krathong fight with the little girls is one of my favorite experiences ever.
Unbelievable.
This was one of the first times that we fought alone, like without a gym. We had just come down to Petrungrung like 7 years ago. But I was fighting for Loy Krathong, and we got there and we had nobody. And so we actually just scanned the crowd and looked at the program to find girls. And there was a little girl that fought before me, and so we went and asked her dad, and they cornered for me. And it was like,
you still have a picture of them.
The whole family, we have it framed. The whole family, like these two little girls just kind of like helping oil me and like going up in the ring.
There is nothing quite like, okay, we're not telling you what to do, but we'll tell you, there is no Muay Thai experience quite like going to a provincial fight where you literally have no connections, nobody advocating for you and shaping things for you, finding a corner like some family that lives and breathes Muay Thai and fighting that fight. It is stripped of all the things that we as Westerners experience as bullshit. It's just pure Muay Thai. It's just beautiful. And then the other weird thing is that you've had absolutely insane corners like Karahat, who's cornered for you probably 15 times or something.
Really good.
This is a legend of the sport. How does he corner you?
Very quietly.
Nothing. Nothing.
Sin. Teep.
Nothing.
No, keep going.
But he won't say anything for 2 rounds practically. He's like,
he yells at me sometimes, like in the round, but it's usually like stay closer or something like that. But it's very like minimal. It's very
like, this is a man who fucking this guy knows Muay Thai so well. One of the great fighters ever, is very experienced in cornering, and his hand is light. It's a light touch. It's so beautiful.
There's also, if you want to get in the like non-traditional blah blah blah, Thai is very like respect whatever da da da. How many opponents have I fought who show up with their girlfriend and it's just 2 people? Like,
not a lot, but some.
But it's a thing. Like basically 2 people from the camp come. They're basically just like, you know, sit and rap and bullshit.
It's very, very far from the concept of the like a video control tape watching Western coach master.
So much face involved.
Yeah. I understand that Westerners have their own self-conception, and they have fought 10, 15 times in Thailand, and they've been here for 5 years. But the attitudes they take towards coaching are very not Thai.
Yeah.
And you get this with Farong pad men. It's like, I don't know what they're locking on to when they're thinking about what this is a good coach or thing. Like, it's not Thai. Thai is minimal conversational cornering or even coaching.
This is, Paulo Tocha came and interviewed me here for something that he's working on, but it's talking about women fighting at Lumpini. And something that I realized as I was saying it was like, for me, women truly arriving at Lumpini, like when women are just mundane through the processes. When I first came to Thailand, was fighting in Chiang Mai, the nerves and the like, oh my God, my trainer's not paying attention to me, and it's 45 minutes before my fight. Why is he not paying attention to me 45 minutes before my fight? Like, it was so anxiety producing. But for the team that came with me, it's Tuesday. Like, the boys are not like stoked to be cornering and like taking care of the people for the fights. They take care of each other when they fight. There is a degree of like relaxed, bored, everything takes a really long time in real Thai fighting, including I have gone with fighters to Lumpini, and the like backstage process of cutting weight, eating, sleeping, getting your massage, wrapping your hands, all of this. There's so much like your main guy is kind of like answering phone calls, seeing what the like, you know, time frame, like everything's very like boring. And the boys are taking care of each other.
And the fight is boring, boredom, not in that boring, it's like a non-event, but it's been done hundreds and hundreds of times.
Right. And so Westerners come here, and we want this like hyper-vigilant, like, how are you feeling? Are you relaxed? Do you have your water? Don't walk around too much.
Some pads?
Like, warm up first kind of thing. Whatever, like, get ready however you want to get ready. But when you import that, and you're like, no, you have to like be super focused, honed in on your trainer. And I'm like, my trainer's like not here and I'm already in the ring. Like, that's real Thailand.
Totally. Remember when you fought Zaza? A huge weight difference on this televised show, and literally Karhat was like,
Karhat's a great corner, but he's also very late.
Sometimes. And he was on the phone and he was like, I'm coming. And it was like
on the taxi.
30 minutes before your fight, you hadn't even seen him.
So we're like, Sanctianoy's here. Maybe we can just ask Sanctianoy to do it.
We asked Sanctianoy and he was like, okay. And then Karhat comes like 20 minutes before the fight. And Sanctianoy's like, oh, you're with Karhat. It's like, that's who wasn't showing up.
I had this fight here at Boxing World fighting Yodcherry Sidyotong, and it was for a belt, so we had to weigh in, and she was not on weight.
Yeah.
She was like cutting weight by sitting in her dad's car in a sweatsuit. It was like so sketchy, and we had no one with us. We had no one from the gym to like kind of enforce anything. We were just kind of like looking around. This guy from her gym showed up. He like came to a skidding stop on his motorbike, and the scale that he had brought from the gym went skidding across the ground that she then miraculously weighed in correctly
They brought in their own scale.
We're like, Thailand.
Well, I want to say this, is that even though you do this like non-adventure tourism, this gonzo fighting, and hundreds of fights like this, there is a detriment that you got to be aware of if you ever explore this, is that you need advocates to be advocating for you within the subculture of a fight promotion if you want not to have bad judgments against you or be matched against somebody who's way bigger than you. Like, the benefit of the more like controlled fight matchup, my gym watches out for me, is you will find more favorable situations. You will find better matchups.
This is not a warning that's like people will totally cheat you if you...
But they might.
They might. You have no insurance. You're like going without insurance.
Yeah.
People treat me very well.
They do treat you very well. Occasionally, if we run into a brand new promoter and there's no advocacy, it's nothing. It's like, oh, the girl's 3 kilos bigger than you said she was. Something like that. Sylvie fights huge all the time, so it's not a problem. But I'm saying, for someone who's like thinking about this in their own... Oh, it's rolling. Okay. You can check your messages later. Okay, our camera got shut off at some point, so we don't even know what was lost on the last thing.
We were so funny and charismatic in that 2 minutes.
2 to 5 minutes we lost. But just to sum up on what we just were talking about, is Sylvie fights in this gonzo way, in this unbelievable historic way that we're not saying anyone should do. Like, we're not telling you to do that, but we're reporting it because nobody's ever done it.
And it's possible.
And it's possible.
Yeah.
And it also is about the textures of Muay Thai culture, much of what the West knows about what very often you come to a gym in Thailand and you train hard and you fight your fights, and you fight in a certain stadium scene or in a promotion, you're on Max or whatever it is, and you think you've seen Muay Thai for Thailand because you are very experienced in your very small world. And I'm like, this is about really off the map stuff. It's a different version of things that very few people even experience a handful of times, let alone 100 times. And so we want to share about these textures and her own personal experience as a fighter, because this is all never been done before stuff. There's been no fighter in Thailand who's learning about herself as a fighter after fight 150 or fight 220. It's like there's evolutions going on as a fighter that just have never happened in any other fighter ever, just by simple matter of experience. And so many of the things she's talking about are lessons that she learned at fight 75 or fight 125 or fight 180. When you were at fight 75, you kind of thought you knew what's what. You were very experienced.
I was like, so it's pretty much this.
Yeah, totally. And you're like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
And it's like, so many of the perspectives on Thailand Muay Thai, people feel like, I pretty much know what it is, but you haven't fought 150 times.
Yeah, but
and it's
for some people who fight 10 times, that is what it is.
Yeah, but I'm saying, we don't tell other people what to do.
Yeah.
We're just sharing what we've learned and experienced.
Yeah.
And part of it is just making one's own history. And then people can take from it whatever they fucking want. But I would say, if you have a chance to fight in the provinces, take it. And maybe try to do it 3 or 4 times, even if it's a gym managed thing or something like that. I mean, it's a different kind of Muay Thai. Honestly, the best refereed Muay Thai in Thailand is in the provinces.
Yeah.
It's when the full rules and all the clinch and everything and the betting and the bettors are up against the ring, and it's just like, that's honestly the real, it's not even stadium Muay Thai. We were at Nam Kabun's funeral, rest in peace, and everybody around a table, like Muay Siam reporters and legends like Put Pad Noi were talking about, and they were like, there's no Muay Thai left in Thailand anymore, the real Muay Thai. And the Muay Siam guy was like, no, in Assam there is.
Yeah. In
the provinces, there is still the real Muay Thai.
Yeah.
And but these are like old school people, and are like, the Muay Thai of Thailand that's televised and whatnot doesn't even qualify as Muay Thai anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for being a part of episode whatever this is. We will try to make more of these because it's enjoyable to talk about and do, but for some reason they're very difficult to produce. But if you're watching on YouTube, you can become a patron. For $1, you get the whole archive of Muay Thai Library sessions on audio subscription. You can add to your subscription thing. Oh, do you want to say anything?
No.
You're very quiet suddenly. Someone's very tired. Do you have to go train or something soon? Thank you for supporting us, though, through Patreon. And the Muay Thai Library is awesome also.
Ajahn Pramod's calling me.
Oh, one of the great coaches in the history of the sport is calling.
Dun, 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 dun,
oh, you're doing the music?
Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Hello, Ajahn.